Hey everyone, Isabelle Fox here, and I'm here today with a lesson of a different kind. Here are some fun facts about common misconceptions related to escorting, and there are a ton of them. However, today I'm going to bring you 5. I wanted to make this video to help correct some misinformation out there within the general population about escorts and what the job of escorting is like. But also, and more importantly, I want to help educate anyone who is thinking of starting or who may have just started out in the industry. These are some common misconceptions I held before I started working, and I came to learn the truth of over time. Arming yourself with knowledge is one of the best investments you can make in your career, especially if you find you're being subjected to stigmatized ideas that are wrong about the industry that may be holding you back from doing what you want to do, or that could be warping your own perception negatively about yourself. So, with that in mind, here are 5 escorting myths you were wrong to believe. Myth 1. Escorting is glamorous. There are 2 ideas people have about escorts. It's either the typical hooker on the street stereotype, or on the other end of the spectrum, it's the idea that escorts are ultra-glamorous women who get flown around by billionaires, wined and dined, taken to fabulous parties, and are bought expensive gifts. While I have had some incredible experiences during my career that fall into that category, for the most part, that's the exception. And yes, there is a very small percent of escorts who have set up their lives to look like this. However, they really are the 5 to 10% of the industry. For the most part, escorting mostly consists of managing a phone, weeding out time wasters, trying to lock in clients, and seeing clients for actual bookings. A standard booking, that being an appointment with a client, lasts for 1 hour and consists of a bit of chit-chat, some getting to know you time, a shower and a sexual health check, kissing, oral sex, and penetrative sex in multiple positions. Then there will be a little more chatting, possibly a round 2, another shower, and a farewell. That's it. Speaking as an escort in Australia, where sex for pay is totally legal, the majority of your work will be sex-focused. Yes, it's definitely not all about sex, and there are some clients who don't want sex at all, and it's very important that you can offer more than just a sexual service to be successful and to get repeat clientele. But if you want to be an escort, you will need to get comfortable with opening the door to an individual you've never met before and having sex with them. They will come in all shapes and sizes, ages, ethnicities, with varying degrees of personal grooming, sexual preferences, different kinks, different personalities, and it's your job, most likely, to cater to their sexual needs. In between that, you will spend a lot of time waiting alone in apartments or hotel rooms, screening client inquiries and trying to get them to book you, and then waiting alone some more to do the same again. If you don't think you can do that, then escorting probably isn't for you. Myth 2. Escorts have heaps of money. The truth is that escorts can have heaps of money, but many do not. And the reason is because escorting is basically commission-only self-employment. If you've ever been self-employed, you will have an idea of the challenges that come with that. You only get paid when you work. There's no sick pay or holiday leave, no base rate or minimum guaranteed wage. When you're an escort, your income is erratic. You likely have a lot of time in your hands, and many people fall prey to the whole confetti money syndrome, which is essentially where you make a lot of money very quickly and in some ways, arguably easily, and then blow it all because you know that all you need is just one more job to make the money back. For this reason, if you're an escort, it's essential that you educate yourself about managing your finances. I also recommend that you track your income and your expenses and work from a monthly average. It can be really tempting to commit yourself to large expenses when you think you can make 10 grand in a week on tour. But if you track your income over a minimum of 3 months, which is what I do with all the people that I work with, you'll find that your low and high weeks tend to actually average out to a similar number each month. And it's that number that you should be planning your expenses around. If you do that, then yes, it can be possible that you will have heaps of money. Myth 3. Escorts are dirty and have diseases. Drawing again on that stereotypical hooker on the street concept, Many people think that escorts are dirty and get lots of sexual diseases. It's definitely true that having sexual contact with a larger amount of people statistically would lead to more opportunity to contact STIs. However, in Australia, sex workers in most areas are required by law to get tested every 3 months. And most escorts, at least in my own personal experience, and I've had contact with a lot of escorts over a number of years now, tend to get tested more frequently than this, and each test is an entire screening, which includes a screening of their throat. Escorts are actually incredibly paranoid about their health, so much so that even when we get signs of a cold, we end up on Google convincing ourselves that we have AIDS and refuse to work till we are tested and cleared. It's actually hugely stressful and really annoying, but better to be safe than sorry, especially when your income actually relies on your sexual health. Unprotected sex is also greatly stigmatized within the sex work community, with anyone offering unprotected penetrative sex seen as cheap and dirty. You'll actually be, to a degree, ostracized by other workers if you are believed to be doing this with clients, especially if you work in an environment where you're closely working with other workers, such as a parlor. Because of this, most sex workers are extremely aware of their sexual health. They're generally more educated than the average person. They perform a visual sexual health screening of their clients, and they even maintain certain practices during the session to decrease health risks. That could be things like using one hand on their client and one hand on themselves and not letting those hands cross over. Between my sex worker and my non-sex worker friends, it's been my non-working friends who have had more STIs that I know about than my working friends. I've also never heard of my non-working friends stopping to perform a sexual health test before getting into bed with a Tinder date. Statistically, it's sex workers who have had far higher rates of sexual screening than non-sex workers, and many health reports in Australia have concluded that sex workers don't have higher rates of STIs than non-sex workers. Though, as I'm not a health professional and I have not made it my life's mission to read all the scientific evidence related to sexual health, I really want to focus more here on my own experience within the industry, having worked in parlors, agencies, and privately for many years. The result has been that I haven't found any experiential or scientific evidence to support the claim that escorts are dirty in a health sense, although we can be dirty in a really fun way, or that they have lots of diseases. Myth 4. Escorts have massive issues or are deeply troubled. There is another thought group that exists that thinks that to become an escort you must be severely unbalanced, have had a really traumatic past, have massive daddy issues, or must just be generally troubled in some way. My experience with humans in general from all walks of life, and keep in mind that I've worked in a profession that comes into contact with a huge variety of people in a very intimate way almost every day, is that most people, when you get the chance to really see them, could be accused of this in some way. For the most part, the majority of escorts are just everyday people who are performing a job to pay their bills. If you didn't know that someone was an escort, you would probably never guess. I do think that there's an argument to be made that when you group people into certain categories based on commonalities, you do tend to find trends amongst those groups. For instance, most lawyers I have ever known are more stressed when you look at them collectively compared to, say, a group of personal trainers, which is obviously understandable when you think about the massive workloads and super long hours most lawyers undertake. You've probably noticed that people who are under a lot of stress are less fun to be around or can be more short or terse in their communication. So as a result, people on the outside could understandably come to think that lawyers don't have much of a personality and aren't very friendly. Looking at escorts collectively as a whole, the only thing I've noticed that stands out about them compared to my non-working peers is that they seem to have higher levels of anxiety, especially within the female sector of workers, which I personally would attribute to the result of having to conceal what they do to most people in their lives, and as well as to everything else that stems from the realities of having to lead something of a double life. Other than that, escorts come from all walks of life and backgrounds, and speaking personally now, I didn't come from much money, but I had a normal upbringing with 2 parents who are still married, a stable childhood, and a normal education. I'm actually not unique in that way, and many escorts I have known have come from equal or even better beginnings and life experiences, as well as, of course, many who have not. To categorize escorts as being people who must be deeply troubled for entertaining sex work as a job is not just incredibly naive, but also just untrue. Myth 5. Escorts do all kinds of weird sexual things with their clients. Whenever I first tell someone I'm an escort, that I work in the sex industry, one of the standard questions I get is, what is the weirdest sexual thing you've ever done? And it usually comes with the assumption that one of the reasons my clients must be paying to see me would be to fulfill some kind of weird kink that they can't perform at home or could ever do with a regular sexual partner. It is true that sometimes this happens, and when it does, it can be a really fun and exciting day at work, or sometimes it's the exact opposite and you leave really thinking how much you dislike your job. However, the majority of the population have relatively vanilla sexual tastes. 80% of the sexual services that are involved in bookings include kissing, then foreplay, meaning kissing on the body, licking, stroking, or just generally what you would do with a partner to turn them on, like groping or undressing each other. Then mutual oral sex, very much with an emphasis of oral sex on the client, and dependent on the worker themselves and the laws related to where they are, this can be done protected or unprotected. And penetrative sex. Rimming is also becoming more and more popular, meaning anal play on both parties. When it comes to the actual penetrative sex itself, the most regularly occurring positions in a booking are missionary, from both people being on top at one time, and doggy. Usually the sex lasts for 20 to 30 minutes, and about 50% of your clientele will be able to go more than once in an hour. And a mirror in the room is basically a must-have. If you have one, you should definitely be sure to position yourself directly in front of it. Outside of that, there is an outlying 20% of clients who ask for more unusual services. This could be things like golden showers, BDSM, cum swapping or snowballing, tromboning, spitting, anal sex, dom and sub play, different sorts of worship play, unusual kinds of role play, and the list is pretty endless. However, not everyone will actually be willing to perform these things, and some services are actually provided by people who are specifically trained in them, such as BDSM. The majority of clients, though, are just regular people with regular desires, similar to a hookup you would probably have with a new sexual partner. So I hope you guys have learned a little here today, or more specifically, unlearned a thing or two about escorts and escorting. Remember, if you're new to escorting, it's important to question what other people may have you trying to believe about your occupation. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and knowledge is always power. As always, I would love to hear from you. Let me know if there's anything you would like to hear more on in my next lessons to come.